Hi, today I'm going to talk about my personal experience with scrying. It's something that I tend to gravitate towards more so than any other method in magic and self betterment. So it's just something, this is just kind of my opinion and the way that I do things and or view them. Um, but maybe it'll be beneficial to somebody else. So let's see. Scrying is really interesting because there's really lots of different ways that you can go about doing it. There's lots of different ways, there's lots of different techniques and tools that can be used. There's also a lot of different ways that I think people internally believe. They have different ways of seeing how scrying is working and what's going on and things like that. And so I was just going to kind of lay out a bunch of that right now, but I think I might do a few different videos on scrying because it is my absolute favorite. So one thing to talk about is the method of scrying, which is kind of just like some people use black mirrors or different things to scry into. Back in the 1500s, I believe that it's kind of what made scrying a thing. Well, actually, I don't want to say that, but I would say like the most famous scryers are from the 1500s, John Dee and Edward Kelly. They did this whole thing where they worked together. One was the scryer and one was the scribe, and they created an entire angelic language called Enochian that people still use today. And they also created a system where you scry to these things called aethers, and there's 30 aethers, and it's kind of like a bullseye where the first aether 1, is right in the middle, and the 30th is the one that's the farthest out. And you start at the 30th and you work your way into the core. With that system and that particular way of scrying, you use these things called calls. And what they are is they're John Dee and Edward Kelly back in the 1500s created this angelic language. And then they created calls to call to the aethers. Kind of, I see it as opening them up, almost like portals. So you call, you do a call. You can get these things in books or online. You do the call either in Enochian and or in English, whatever you prefer. I think that the angelic Enochian really works quite well. And then you scry, then you go to the aether. John Dee and Edward Kelly, they used black mirrors, or a black mirror rather, a circular black mirror made of obsidian. Obsidian is a wonderful substance, a glass. I think it's a volcanic glass or something. It's just a wonderful reflective surface. And so that's definitely associated as a tool for scrying, but you don't have to use obsidian. You could also make a black mirror with just paint on glass. I've done that. But just because they used the obsidian, and that is kind of like a way that a lot of people do it, there's a lot of different methods other than that. Excuse me. So sometimes people, and this is also ancient, the practice of scrying into water bowls. So you just take any vessel, any bowl, and as long as you can kind of see the surface of the water, you can scry into that, meaning you're looking into it, by the way. So I guess I should have mentioned that, but you're just kind of gazing at the surface for insights. So other people will use, or I've used all of these, by the way. I've used every single one of these methods. I've scryed into obsidian. I've scryed into glass that's been painted black. I've scryed into water. You can also scry into fire, the flames of fire, or you can burn incense or something else and scry into the smoke. You can literally scry into anything, actually. You could scry into a wooden wall. The gist of it is that you just are using that surface as a means to do what we're going to talk about in a minute. But anyways, the biggest way that I scry, though, is actually just by shutting my eyes. So I shut my eyes and then just use like the blackness of my eyelids, and that seems to be the best method for me. I still use a black mirror to go into, kind of to get started with the working. And that's just my preferred method. It's kind of like, for me, like a doorway into the scrying. But then I just shut my eyes. So that's kind of like the tools. Those are some of the main tools that you can use. And basically you can just kind of sit down and dedicate some time to scrying. I think it's really important to set a timer. That's just me, because then it kind of tell yourself and whatever it is, however you perceive what you're working with, whether it be spirits or angels or anything like that, that there's kind of a structure involved. Like, we're going to do this for 10 minutes and my phone alarm is going to go off in 10 minutes and that's the set time that I'm going to scry in. So that's what I do. I think that works really wonderfully, just because sometimes you don't know when the vision is the most important. If you just sit there for like an hour or something like that, you're going to have a lot of visions. And so it's kind of important to be able to have a start and stop time. I don't want to freak anybody out, but there was just someone passing, and so I didn't want them to be like, she's a witch in the woods. But I am a witch and I am in the woods. So I think I should mention here that the way that Dee and Kelly did it, where they scry to aethers using Enochian, that is only one way to scry. You can scry in a way that is not to the aethers. You can scry to different things. So I just thought that I would kind of make that clear, is that you don't have to use the Enochian system to scry. But you can. So I think another big thing with how I view scrying is that it's important for me to have an intention when I sit down and do it, even if that intention is very broad, and that is, for example, I could sit down and say, during this scrying session, I wish to gain insight on something that I need to gain insight on, period. But I do think that it's important to kind of frame that you want insight. And if you can, frame it even further into what you want insight on. I think that also sets up a really nice structure and parameter for kind of the way that you use the information once you have it, that you get in the scrying session. So I would say intention is very important. Another thing that I think is important is the way that you perceive how the scrying is working. I actually do not want to limit in any way how anyone would consider scrying to work. There are probably endless ways to consider that. But I think, just personally, that it's important in each session to kind of set up like, okay, this is how I perceive this scrying is a possibility. And what I mean by that is sometimes scrying is used to approach angelic angels. I just said angelic angels. I meant Enochian angels. Sometimes scrying is perceived as going towards a helping guide. Sometimes it's just you're going to connect with spirit. You could scry to a particular deity or a particular energy. Really, the possibilities are endless. Also, and I've done all of these, by the way, and I've also done where I'm just scrying into myself. I'm literally scrying into my subconscious. I'm scrying into what it is that's inside of me that just kind of needs to kind of come out, almost like an ink blot. Like it's there, I see it, and then I perceive like what it is that it just comes to the surface. I kind of actually really like a combination of when I scry, this is my subconscious working with spirit. They come together, and together, the internal, the external, the microcosm, the macrocosm, the whole thing, myself and my personal star inside is connecting with the greater universe, and I'm getting a message. So I just think that it's important that in each session, you kind of at least have an idea, especially when you're just starting out, because that way you can connect with it more deeply. So that's another kind of thing that I wanted to talk about. So the next thing with scrying, when you scry, you're either looking into these tools and surfaces, the flames, or in the blackness of your eyes closed, and you just dedicate that time to whatever comes up. That is not restricted to only visuals. That could be smell, it could be hearing, it could be a feelings in your body, it could be that a rush of certain emotions come over you. It could be anything. It could be like thoughts that just come up. You don't see them as visuals, but you start thinking of things. And so it's another thing about the 10 minutes or so that you do your scrying session, which you can choose a different time, is that I like to intentionally say before a scrying, during this scrying, whatever symbols arise, those are the symbols that I am supposed to see. And I say see, but I mean perceive and experience. Because as magicians and witches and people that are trying to use symbols and things like that, it's all too easy to kind of see symbols everywhere you go, actually, and connect all these kind of lines and stuff like that. But, when you're walking down the street, you don't always want to actually connect everything. But in a scrying session, I think it's just great to say, yes, for these 10 minutes, what I see is going to be kind of like the material that is important, the symbols that are important, the message of the scrying. And so that kind of brings me into the next thing that I think is important. And it is that when you scry, the ability to take what you see and, of course, write it down. So you have the vision for 10 minutes, you immediately write that down. Write down what you saw, what you experienced, what you felt. What you experience is a better way to say it than what you saw. Write down what you experienced, and then immediately after that, take notes. What symbols are popping out? What was it that, because I'm telling you, it could be anything. It could be anything. It could be an object. It could be an emotional state. It could be a person, an archetype. It could be an action, a gesture. It could be a smell. It could be an orientation. Maybe you felt something in your belly. Maybe you felt like you were being turned upside down. Maybe you felt like a pressure somewhere. Maybe you smelled fresh cut grass. Anything. Write it down, and just literally, if you would like. But then the next very vital, important part is to translate that into the world of symbolism. And the reason why we would do that is it's the whole reason for the whole working in the first place, is that what you experience in the scrying can be utilized in your life. It can be transformed and translated into something that is actually helpful symbolism that you can actually pick up and walk around with and use it to help you. So, symbols are interesting because there's kind of almost two main ways to work with symbols, and a gradient in between. The two ways are, one, you have where you can, if you get a symbol of a tree, for instance, that's my go-to. But if you get the symbol of a tree, you can look that up on the internet. You can look that up in your symbol books. You can look it up in your collective conscience, and be like, oh, the tree represents this to a lot of people. But there's also going to be things that symbols say to you that are going to be uniquely for you. Like you might have had like an experience when you were like way younger, or something that really stood out to you, or even a TV show or something, like just whatever it is that was impactful for you. Like maybe in your scrying you see a pumpkin, right? Okay, so we see a pumpkin. So a lot of people universally are going to think fall time. They're going to think Halloween. They're going to think about, cutting out a jack-o'-lantern, maybe putting a light in it, making a face, fun times, costumes, Halloween stuff, right? But maybe when you were younger, like something really weird happened. Like maybe, you were at like a party, a Halloween party, and someone like smashed a pumpkin, and inside the pumpkin there was like dollar bills that just like flew out. This did not actually really happen to me, but if you see a pumpkin in your scrying session, then, and you had that experience, and you think of that experience either during the scrying session or after when you're taking your notes, that's important. So maybe it's more about like abundance or money or a surprise or something like that. And so the ability to transform your symbols into what they mean is really, really vital for scrying. I mean, it's basically the whole premise of it. So you take all the symbols, you take all the feelings and the thoughts and everything, and you write about them, of what they mean to you. And take it from the universal, take it from the personal, take it from all in between, whatever it is. You could see a pumpkin 5 times in your scrying if you do it enough, and maybe one of the times it really is about that pumpkin that, smashed when you were a kid. But maybe another time it's not. Maybe another time, like, you just have to trust your gut and your instincts and your intuition about what it is that, how you connect with the symbols that you're seeing, experiencing. And then kind of like the last thing that you do is you take that into your life. So the whole point of it is, if you go into a scrying session and you intend to better your business or better a relationship or get some insight on X, Y, Z, whatever, when you're thinking about that in walking life, and when you're experiencing it, and when you're doing it, and when you're right there, then it sometimes unfolds. Like, you take the symbols, and immediately I tend to have like an immediate, like, oh, I get it. This is the way, from this experience that I've had, this is, I can see how I need to orient myself. Maybe even generally, like you get a sense of like, that's what this meant. This is what I'm supposed to pay attention to. And then oftentimes it will unfold either in the next few hours, the next few days, sometimes the next few weeks or months. It unfolds and you go, this is a part of that scrying. This is a part of that symbol that, my intuition or my internal self or that spirit or that deity or that angel told me. And you can actually see how scrying can play out and help in your life. So I think that that's all I have for the scrying, but I think I want to do other scrying videos. Maybe let me know if you want to see like ones on like how to make a scrying mirror out of some really cheap material. Maybe like how to do an Enochian call, or like more on how to like use the symbols even, or some history of John Dee and Edward Kelly, just different stuff like that, because I really like scrying a lot. So anyways, I hope you're doing really well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.